Welcome back to the Growth Catalyst podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by our very own Ian Harvey, who is strategy and OKR consultant at ZOKRI. We talk about the challenges that business leaders are facing while leading strategy through organisational collaboration. The themes running through our conversation were purpose and communication. Ian manages to take a complex and sometimes seemingly overwhelming subject and then shows how to take a very human approach to those strategic challenges. I hope you enjoy. Hi Ian, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Good to see you, Collette.
So Ian, you've been doing obviously quite a bit of work with the ZOKRI team. Could you give me a sort of a background as to how you've got here? How's your experience?
Sure. Yeah, it's very convoluted, and I won't bore everyone with all of the details. But in summary, I started off studying computer science. I'm a geek by nature. Still buy all the latest gadgets. Still interested in trying all the latest technology. But when I took that into the commercial world, I found I didn't have the attention span to be an engineer. So I quickly ended up, really before the terms were even popular, I ended up as a product manager in a pretty big organization, GlaxoSmithKline, and then became a strategist, which I guess is really the heart of what I am. I'm a strategist, really, a kind of big picture thinker, systems thinker. But my career, really for the first phase, was in large organizations, companies like GSK. I worked for EMC and in their software practice as a consultant, and more recently I worked at Pearson and Elsevier, who are publishing organizations, and for them I did a mixture of roles. I was a product manager, I was a portfolio director, I worked in strategy, and really there were a couple of things that always connected my career, and that was, two questions I asked, really annoyed leaders with them. And it was, why are we doing this? How will we know if we've succeeded? And at Elsevier, we had a problem there, which was we didn't know, 52% of people didn't know how their work connected to strategy, which they're not a massive organization, but that's a lot of people who are doing work without really knowing why. And we uncovered OKRs as a potential solution to that. We had a good implementation. I was really right in the central team, helping roll out OKRs, understanding them myself at the time. And I worked with someone called Felipe Castro. If you Google OKRs, Felipe's still on the first page. So he's pretty well known in OKR circles. Also very good at SEO, you probably realize. And I decided didn't want to work in big corporate anymore. I wanted to go and be a consultant. And Felipe and I worked together for about 18 months. The challenge for me was we were working with enormous organizations, and although it was fun to work with them, I didn't feel that the impact we were having was enough for me. So I decided to work on my own, and I aim then really at much smaller organizations. In simple terms, maybe 50 to 400 people, startups, scale-ups, and generally organizations who've tried working with OKRs. And that's how that I was working in that kind of context when I met Matt. And Matt Roberts from ZOKRI. I think what connects us is a very similar view of the kind of client we want to work with and what we believe OKRs are about. So in terms of OKRs themselves, I think having that shared view is really crucial. And really, I think I describe myself as a strategy and OKR coach. And really why that's important is because OKRs are strategy execution. They connect those two things together. And understanding that relationship is crucial for me. And I think Matt has a similar view. So that's how I got where I am. It's very convoluted. I enjoy it. I think we have an opportunity to have a big impact with organizations. That's why I'm here. But quite a circuitous route.
So actually that's really interesting. And you sort of talk about strategy. You talk about attention span and actually sort of really getting engaged with clients and teams. If less than 50% of people don't know what they're doing, then I can understand that's a pretty frustrating existence to be involved in.
Absolutely.
So obviously there's some potential frustrations. Why is there something in particular that makes you love what you do today?
I think it's because of impact ultimately. OKRs are a very lightweight framework, and that means two things. They're hard to implement because people don't know everything you should do, but also it, you can build around it and have a view of it. And Matt and I both have a set of OKR principles that we use to help clients. And what makes that interesting is you're not entirely sure when you work with a new client where the opportunity and where the challenges are. It's not just a question of create some objectives or key results. It's more of, okay, they're actually quite simple. What's holding us back from implementing OKR as well? So there's that understanding the context, there's that having empathy for the customer's problems, and finding a solution to that and working with the client to it's not just implementing OKRs. That's what makes it exciting and interesting for me.
Yeah, that is interesting. So I think you've started to allude to that. So what would you say are the core skills and knowledge areas that you would rely on the most, sort of in working with clients and then with any implementation?
Yeah, that is an interesting question because you kind of have to step back a bit yourself to answer that. And really, in terms of the technical skills, why I'm good at strategy and OKRs is because I've had that kind of circuitous career path where I've been an engineering manager, so I know the kind of challenges that they face. I've been a product manager, so I know what product managers face. So you have that systems view. You can see all the different components that can make or break a good operating system for an organization. What you need on top of that, I think, and this is just generally as a consultant, is an ability to listen and to not prejudge. Because we very easily you can go from client to client and you can see a couple of clients where they have similar problems and you can think it's universal, and it isn't. So I'm always learning every single time I talk to a new client. You have to go in there with that open mind and that willingness to be surprised, to have your preconceptions challenged, and just having that empathy to understand the situations, because a lot of the problems are human problems. You know, they're not system problems. They're not technical.
Right. Okay. So what are the really hard things to do?
I think where the challenge is I would consider myself to be a systems thinker. So I can see often how leadership behavior or individual behavior, team behavior is causing a problem. Getting people to kind of hold that mirror up and see that for themselves. So, um, a a leader may say that they're all about outcomes. They really want to focus on the outcomes their teams are delivering rather than the outputs. Then they have a conversation with their team, and all they're talking about is deadlines. When are you going to release this? When is this going to be available? And often it's difficult for people to realize that they're the source of the challenge. So one of the principles is that is leadership behavior is fundamental to OKR success. So at least you're setting that tone, that they need is their own behavior is probably the most difficult to change. So yeah, and getting them to actually do that and to reflect on that is hard.
So what you learned to overcome? Are there a classic set of behaviors, or is it always different? And then how on earth do you tackle that?
I think one of the classic things is virtually every CEO I've spoken to um, talks about speed, and when they mean speed, they're actually talking about often how quickly software gets released is what it comes down to. Um, and that's complicated for many reasons. I mean, first of all, estimating in software engineering is still a very imprecise art. It's not really a science, I don't think. Um, uh, and leaders, they see a problem in front of them. So their customer needs a particular feature. They want to know when that's going to be released, and they focus on that output. And it's very human to focus on outputs. We instantly see a problem, we jump to a solution. We can't help it. And what you want the leader to do really is to actually step back and how do we learn that this feature is going to do the job we expect it to? How is it going to have the outcome we expect? And it's a completely different mindset to immediately draw a conclusion about what's needed and then bending all of our will to make that happen as quickly as possible. So yeah, it's that. I guess the heart of it is most of our ideas don't work as we expect them to, and leaders think that what they're great at is having great ideas. They think it's these ideas around the way they solve a customer problem. But actually, what really great leaders do is set a strategic context and a cultural context for success. And that's a huge mindset shift from, I'm an ideas person, which a lot of CEOs probably see themselves as. I'm not saying that's not important. That core strategic idea is very important, but you don't succeed with that alone. It's actually, how do we learn? How do we continuously improve? How do we give people the context to make decisions themselves? And yeah, how do we support people?
So actually that leads sort of quite nicely into my next question. So are there any usual sort of misconceptions as people are sort of going, even just thinking about it or going into a project when they're thinking about OKRs?
Um, are there any common misconceptions? I think one of the most common things is that it's just about setting OKRs, that all you have to do is write some objectives and key results and give them a time frame, and that's all you need to do. And clearly, I mean, clearly it isn't. I think one of the challenges is that maybe if you did just create OKRs and got out of people's way, they would have a good positive impact. But the truth is that there's a lot more to it. It's part of a big system. It's a system problem. It's not just a goal setting problem.
Because we're all creatures of habit, right? If that's how we've always done things, then like without practicing and sort of being really sort of mindful and active, then you're just going to go back and maintain the status quo, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that Felipe used to do is, or say, is one of the biggest management misconceptions is that OKRs, you can just relabel all the things you're already doing as OKRs and you'll have an impact. And of course, that's not true. It's actually behavioral change you're looking for.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, so sort of delving into what's going on right now, what's going on in the market. So what are the most sort of pressing challenges that you're seeing for business leaders today?
It's interesting because it links back to that previous question. What do leaders see as the problem, and what is kind of the dripping tap in their mindset? And often what they see as the problem is speed, that teams don't execute quickly enough. And the second thing is that every leader now is continually asked, what's their AI strategy? And it's just continuous. And I mean, I use AI quite a lot in my practice. We've had clients, and I've had clients who are AI native. So I'm not dismissive of the capabilities, but I think you have to be very, very mindful about the problems you're solving with AI. So, that's a noise almost for CEOs. They feel that they must. They look on social media. My peers, other CEOs, are having dramatic impact. Increased developer productivity, X, Y, and Z that they're seeing. Why am I not? But it's a bit like Instagram, isn't it? You see people's lives on Instagram; they always look fantastic. They've got the best home, they have the best holidays, they eat the best food, and LinkedIn is a bit like that as well. and CEOs kind of fall into that trap of thinking, I need to be doing something really impressive with AI. So helping them recenter on what outcome, what problem are they solving with it, is a big deal. I mean, on the speed thing, which I think is the other thing that CEOs talk about, well, the heart of that problem is actually work in progress. So most teams, no, that's not true. All teams I talk to and all leadership teams have too much going on at once. They're trying to do too many things. I have this kind of technique I use with leadership teams is just write a post-it note for every kind of project or thing you're thinking about and looking at the moment. And they start off and they write the big project down. And then once they get going, though, that board fills up with post-it notes. And there's so much going on at the leadership level. And it's the same for teams. There's questions from other teams. There's, can you get me this piece of data? There's, can you just implement this little feature for a particular customer? And when you look at the work in progress people have, it's way too high. So with OKRs, what we're trying to do is make the most important thing in a particular situation explicit. We're trying to achieve A or we're trying to achieve B. And you also try to give them the team where they're not having too many dependencies on other people. So you create a team which it's cross-functional. It's got the marketing person, the product manager, the engineer, and they're working together on the same problem. They don't have to then get to a point, oh no, we need a marketing campaign for this. We'll have to wait till someone's available, or we need a designer for this. They're away on holiday for 3 weeks and there's no one else. You have that, all of the skills in the team as much as possible. There are limits, but so those are the things that really make a difference to speed. Actually doing less and having the right people around to actually share and owning the problem.
Taking the strategy, carving it up. I know this all sounds logical, sort of digestible, bite-sized chunks, and then making sure you've got the right team with the right skill set, then all sort of on the same page. That does not sound easy.
It isn't easy. But okay, the question is, why is it hard?
Yeah.
Would be my question.
Yeah.
And it's hard because people, I think one of the reasons is because of traditional line management routes. So let's imagine you're the head of marketing. I'm the head of engineering, and there's a design lead as well. And we're used to telling our teams, what they should be working on. We're used to saying to them, you're going to produce this, or you're going to work on this, and you're going to tell me about progress on this. When we create a cross-functional team to work on an OKR, we're breaking that model. We're saying to line managers, actually, that's not your job anymore. You're no longer telling people what to do. They're working as in a collective team on this goal, and your job is to support them and to coach them and help improve their craft and their technique. And that's really different to the kind of traditional line management model of handing out tasks. So that I think is one of the biggest challenges that we see. And so there's an education issue there.
Yeah. So are there techniques and approaches that you can use to help with that?
So going back to one of my previous companies, I think Elsevier generally have done a really good job. You have to prioritize helping line managers become coaches. You have to be really. It's like with OKRs, you're being explicit about what's important.
Yeah.
And if you want your line managers to develop a skill around coaching, you have to be explicit about that. You have to prioritize it. You have to give them training. You have to work with them. You have to, as someone who manages a line manager, you have to kind of check on their skills. You have to coach them as well. So it's about being really deliberate and intentional. Coaching, it's a skill, but it's a skill that most people can get and most people can build. Empathy is an important part of it, but it's just being intentional. It's not just it's not sending a deck out to all the line managers and saying, you're no longer handing out tasks, you're a coach, and then expecting them to suddenly, change personality. Doesn't work.
No. Yeah. Explicit. So that makes a lot of sense. So, if you had some time, I mean, I know you regularly do, but if you have, 10, 15 minutes with a CEO contemplating OKRs, what would your advice be? What would you say?
Well, it really, that's really going to depend on their context. So in the first, if I had 15 minutes, I'd probably spend 10 minutes listening, asking them questions, seeing what problems they're facing. What are those problems generally? Again, as I've mentioned a few times, it's around speed. And my first question would be is, okay, if I pick a few people in the organization, what are they working on? Have a look, realize just how many different things they're working on, how much context switching they're doing. And as someone with ADHD, context switching, I'm very aware of. My own brain is pushing me towards that. If your context and your job is pushing you towards it, it becomes very difficult to then get into that kind of that flow state. Um, so my advice would be two things. I think there'd be number one, be really explicit about the most important things. So maybe even just start with one goal. Make that clearly the most important thing. Make everyone aware that you're going to talk about that more than anything else. Stop talking about progress so much on building things and talk about progress towards that OKR. And number two, I'd get a group of people whose entire job is about delivering against that OKR. So it's that limiting number of OKRs, creating a cross-functional team. And that's an experiment you can try relatively cheaply. In fact, I think I posted on LinkedIn about it a little while ago. For a month, just create one OKR for a team, make them dedicated, give them all of the skills they need as far as you can, and see what progress they make. In fact, one of our clients not long ago that Matt and I for ZOKRI were working on said that they were astonished by the progress they made with a team. And obviously we were delighted, but in truth, all we really did for them is say, is that advice. Create a cross-functional team, make it very clear what they're working on, and remove their distractions. And that really, I mean, don't tell anyone, because obviously we want people to believe what we tell them is much more nuanced and complicated than that. But in truth, that was all it took.
But it's still a process, right? There's still lots of conversations. You've still got to identify what that key objective is.
Yes. Yeah.
Get the right people
Absolutely.
involved. Because I can imagine it can be quite tricky if you've got some, dissenters, some people that are sort of fearful of the process. And I guess the message from the leadership or the big boss is actually sort of making safe space. But again, how would you manage the potential dissenters inside this sort of project?
Yeah, I think implementing OKRs is like any change program, and you've got to approach things like that with a listening mindset. You've got to understand why people are dissenting, what their different point of view is. And it's not just about, you don't go into that conversation just trying to convince them they're wrong. You've got to understand what's behind that. Why do they think this won't work? What are the risks they see? And you may even change how you're going to approach it from that perspective. But yeah, it's a classic change management. You're changing behaviors. You need to listen. You need to understand also what's in it for people. There's a lot of pushback on the idea of a pilot at the moment, which I see, which I understand that. But what a pilot does is gives you a kind of safer space to understand a change, and a pilot team can also start to articulate what's in it for everyone else. I'm an engineer. Why has this made my job better? How does it help me do a better job? I'm a line manager. How is working with people who are now in an OKR team rather than being directed by me, how's that different? Why is it better? How am I, really helping that person grow? So, yeah, I think dissenters are inevitable. People don't like change. I think it's just so be empathetic, I think, is probably the bottom line. But yeah,
totally. I think sharing the purpose, the reason why, and then sort of getting under the hood as to why there may be fear, and then obviously trying to make sure that it's a collective mission.
that's Yeah.
Yeah.
You actually, what you said there was actually probably the most important thing, and I didn't say it. It's the why. Start with. I know Simon Sinek gets a bit of stick these days, but starting with the why is so crucial. If people don't understand why you're trying to do something, what's the problem you're solving, why are they going to engage with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm doing a series of these, and in every single conversation, it's the why, always the why. What is the purpose? And then, yeah, just articulating that well to the right audience as well. Like, one communication strategy is not necessarily going to land if with different, like you say, engineers or marketing
Yeah.
people or salespeople. Actually, communication style does definitely have to differ.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing how often, and it goes back well before I was using OKRs, how often there is no one's ever talks about the why. We're doing something because we need to, or very facile, superficial reasons. And yet, as human beings, we want to know that. We don't want to just blindly march into something. We want to be okay. We want to have a purpose.
Well, folks say, yeah, because I said so.
Okay, okay, fair enough. Well, you're paid. You're signing my check, so okay. Yeah.
So I think you've given some really interesting sort of ideas in there, but is there one quick win that you could sort of give an organization? I know you said about sort of some cross-functional teams. Would that be it?
It would,
Um,
yeah, it would be. I would, if you've failed with OKRs or you've not tried OKRs, I would just try it with one. Find one important problem, um, work out what success looks like, and write that down. Actually share the thinking behind the OKR. Don't just write a goal and a metric. Write down the thinking. Pick a couple of people to start with and ask them who they need to work on this to help them achieve this goal, because they'll have their own perspectives, and give that team space for a period of time, 2 or 3 months, and see what they do, see what
yeah.
you learn. That would be my quick win, because it will also hopefully help answer the why question for some people as well. Oh yeah, I can see that. Look how quickly that team moved, or look how clear it was what they were working on. Yeah, that would be my where to start.
And are there any other questions that leaders should be asking their teams?
I think the first question is what, because so often it's speed. What is slowing you down? What are you working on? And sometimes that can be a mirror. You've got 5 people in the leadership team, all who have kind of slightly different perspectives. Go and ask team questions. Go and ask them for a data point. Maybe sometimes, you know, plug a feature into the backlog, and making that level of distraction visible to leaders can be really powerful. So, but if they are asking teams what's slowing you down, rather than just assuming there's some kind of problem with engineers, or it can be incredibly insightful. Don't assume you know why things are slow.
Thank you. So, sort of moving into what's going on over the horizons over the next 12 months. Now, I appreciate none of us have got a crystal ball, and you've already touched upon it around AI. Obviously, it's the hot topic everywhere. Um, what's your take on what business leaders should be preparing for in the coming sort of 12 months?
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm seeing, honestly, from my perspective, the same old problems for leaders in terms of being really explicit about what's important, being very articulate about their strategy, making sure that they give as much context to people as they possibly can. One of the things that's just going back to the slowing down, is that people need a decision, or they don't think they can act because they're waiting for a decision. And the more leaders give context, the better. In terms of my personal use of AI so far, just touching on that, has been very much around, well, two things: sharpening up my thinking by sharpening up my writing. I think large language models was great at pointing out logical fallacies in your own thinking. I think that's really helpful. Um, and I think it's about, just starting to use tools to solve your own little problems. So, really silly example, but I was running a board retreat for a not for profit in the US, and we had I think 16 people in the group, and I wanted the tool to I wanted, sorry, to make those breakout groups. There were 4 over the days to make sure people got mixed up together, so they met different people. Um, but there were some people I didn't want. There were the leaders who I wanted to keep separate, and I just stuck that list into ChatGPT and said, produce 4, workshops with a mix of attendees. These ones never work together. There was some mobility issues as well. I just plugged that in, and it came out with the answer in 3 seconds. And I think when you solve those kind of problems yourself, you start to then understand, okay, maybe there's something we can use for customers here. There's a friction point for our customers which we could easily solve with AI, and I think that's a good kind of gateway, I believe, in there. It's certainly how I'm thinking about it, and yeah, it's helping me. I think it can help others too. How about you? What have you used AI for?
Very similar thinking. I, like you, ADHD, so sometimes I might, my brain can go all over the place and come up with solutions that I wasn't even thinking about. And other times I can find it really challenging to find a solution like the problem you just talked about. So just asking, one of the AI tools that I use, just how to help me think about something, I find incredibly useful because that scenario that you've just outlined about different people and trying to set them up in different ways. I'd probably spend hours and days and have sleepless nights in trying to find that solution. But because you're experienced enough to ask the question, you're bringing all of the experience of running those workshops, of understanding what people are going to do and how they're going to behave, and actually putting the question together to actually get the answer within a few seconds. That's brilliant, because that means I'm using my brain in the right way rather than allowing me to focus on a weakness of maybe not being able to find the idea and the solution quite quickly. That's exactly how I use
Yeah,
AI.
yeah, yeah. It's great. I was just thinking as you were talking there that another thing that I've done, and I need to use it more because I think it's really powerful. Is just, I don't know if you've used the concept of a pre-mortem, and you can use it in lots of different contexts. It's basically what could go wrong. So you ask it at the start of an initiative, start of a project, or even the start of a workshop, and I've kind of put that into a large language module and said, "Here's my agenda. What could go wrong here?" And quite often it comes up with stuff, and you think, "Yeah, okay, didn't think of that. Might
Yeah.
need to rethink." Mm.
So that efficiency. So I suppose the one thing I am seeing and hearing, all the stuff I read, is it's about the clarity. And actually, there's been a theme throughout this conversation around kind of safety and clarity and good comms. So if a leadership team hasn't if they're fearful of AI and they're not sure, they haven't got the clarity themselves, then obviously that's going to just sort of spread out across the rest of the organization, and then maybe people are taking it away and they're using it kind of underground, and therefore there's the innovation and the learnings are not being brought back into the organization. So where's the safety there for everybody? And then
Yeah,
where's the
that's
clarity? Because what's the communication around that? Who should be doing what? And I think it's getting better, but for quite some time now, it feels that it's not been clear. Is that your
I,
experience as
I,
well?
w- I was speaking to someone literally 10 minutes before this call who is in a fairly large organization and is seeing exactly that challenge. Leaders on one hand saying we need to use AI, but also not being very clear about what data can be put in, what tools they can use.
Yeah.
So people are really kind of nervous, confused, but also on the other hand being pushed to do something. So yeah, that clarity is massively important, and that's safety as ever.
So I guess maybe the one of the takeaways for the leaders listening here, if they don't know how to approach it, get the right team together and ask the question
Yeah,
using an
yeah.
OKR framework and approach, right? Then perhaps you'll arrive at a policy or at least a communication.
Yeah, just let people know. Yeah, it's so, when people fill in the dots, they don't always fill in the right dots. We know
But
that
people are
for a
generally
fact.
coming from the right place. but we're all different. We've all got different experiences, different lived experiences, different lives, different thought processes, different brains, as you and I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Like,
for
yeah,
sure.
stop allowing us all to fill in the dots because, yeah, doesn't always end well.
Absolutely not.
So actually on that sort of leads nicely, as you're aware, I've written a book about
Hmm.
leadership behavior, and it's not about naming and shaming. It's just about calling out the stuff that we've all done. We've all, behaved that way. And I think that the sort of younger and hungrier I was to lead, I sort of look back and realize there wasn't some great behavior in there, but over time, I hope I've got better. So have you got any anecdotes or stories? There's two sides of the coin, say not naming and shaming. I think everybody I speak to has always got a terrible story about somebody that's done something terrible, and how that's impacted them. But actually, I'd really like to hear any positive stories. Has there been a leader or somebody in your career and your squiggly career that's just given you that moment and perhaps changed how you thought, what you've done next, maybe even the progression of your career?
I guess one example that comes to mind was a manager of mine in a fairly big organization who, and it comes back to something I've talked about a bit today, really. And what you just said about people coming from the right place, it was just actually we were struggling with another team who were as from our perspective, we were being let down. They missed deadlines. They didn't do what they were say they were doing, and I was getting more and more cheese off of them. And actually, what my manager said at the time is, okay, do you think they're doing it just to annoy us? Do you think they're bad at their jobs, or do you think there's some other context that we're not aware of? And encouraging me to have a conversation with the other team and to really understand what was going on for them. It did two things. It made me understand the restrictions and the constraints they were acting under, which I wasn't aware of. And it also built a relationship, so we could empathize about, life in a big company and what was holding us back. So, yeah, that was just a great, it's just that assuming that people are coming from the right place makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. Is there anything that I should have asked you?
I don't think so. No, I think that was a kind of good tour around my experience and my kind of current thinking. Might be different tomorrow. I think, but that's where I am today.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time talking with me, Ian. It was really interesting, and I think the just that thread of just that the human being behind it all is an incredibly powerful message that
Yeah,
seems to come
that's
through.
what it comes down to. That is, yeah, that's yeah. If we uh, believe the best in others and listen to their perspective, that covers so many beyond strategy and OKRs. Covers a lot of different bases.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.